The studio monitor flickered once, twice, and then held steady. A single name burned in white text against the black screen. Maya Boyd as Storm. The production office was silent, but the digital world outside was not. The official announcement hit the servers at exactly noon. 3 million clicks registered in the first 4 seconds. The main server hub groaned under the sudden, massive influx of traffic. Data packets collided. Load balancers tripped their breakers. Within 15 seconds, the official portal went black. No error page, no backup. The entire infrastructure simply collapsed under the sheer weight of the global demand. Across every major social platform, the feed jammed. Refresh buttons were hammered by millions of users simultaneously. The news was not just being read, it was tearing through the digital landscape, consuming bandwidth and locking up networks. In the quiet of the studio, the monitor remained active, displaying the name that had just broken the internet. The silence inside the room felt heavy, contrasting with the chaotic storm of data surging across the world outside. The decision was out. The reaction was instantaneous. The era of speculation had ended, replaced by a sudden, undeniable reality. The office door pushed open. Maya Boyd walked in, her footsteps echoing against the polished concrete floor. She did not look at the producers or the screens still scrolling through panic-stricken error reports. She crossed the room, stopped at the desk, and looked down at the documents waiting for her signature. The pen lay on the paper, a simple, heavy instrument of intent. She reached out, her fingers wrapping firmly around the cold metal barrel. For a heartbeat, she held still. The weight of the moment settled over the room, silencing the frantic chatter of the staff behind her. She did not smile. She did not hesitate. She pressed the nib to the page, the ink flowing in a sharp, decisive line. Her name appeared, clear and permanent. She set the pen down with a soft click, the sound sharp in the quiet office. The contract was complete. She turned away from the desk, her pace measured, and walked toward the makeup trailer. The transition was absolute. She left the office behind, moving into the corridor, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. The contract was signed, the ink was dry, and there was no going back. Outside the heavy iron gates of the studio, the pavement was already crowded. People had arrived with hand-painted signs, the ink still wet on the cardboard. They pressed against the perimeter fence, watching the entrance for any sign of movement. A single voice called out a name, then another joined in, and soon the scattered shouts aligned into a steady, rhythmic cadence. The air near the gates vibrated with the sound. It was not just noise, it was in physical force, a pulse of collective expectation that seemed to rattle the metal bars of the entrance. Security guards stood in a line along the interior, watching the crowd with unblinking focus. Every few seconds, the chanting surged in volume, rising like a tide against the high stone walls. The sidewalk was packed with bodies, people shifting their weight, straining to see past the barricades. Someone raised a sign higher, the cardboard catching the afternoon light. The energy was tangible, a static charge that seemed to linger in the humid air. The studio might have been built of concrete and steel, but the sound of the crowd penetrated every wall, a reminder that the world outside was waiting, watching, and demanding to be heard. Across the digital landscape, the discourse underwent a violent shift. Speculation burned out, replaced by a cold, surgical analysis of every frame available. Fans began to strip down her past work, isolating gestures and micro-expressions, then layering them over classic comic book panels. A new form of visual language emerged on every platform. Millions of users shared the same composite images, a digital collage that pinned her identity to the role with terrifying speed. The algorithms caught the wave, pushing the content into every corner of the web. It was no longer a question of whether she could do it. The consensus had already been reached. Her face was everywhere, mirrored in thousands of fan-made edits that blended her features into the aesthetic of the character. The feedback loop was relentless. Each post gained momentum, stacking data points until the internet seemed to pulse with a single, unified name. Analysts paused her previous movements, predicting the physicality she would bring to the project, turning guesswork into perceived fact. The public did not just accept the casting, they claimed it, weaving her into the history of the character until the line between the actress and the role dissolved entirely. Maya stepped into the center of the production room, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The hum of the studio outside vanished, replaced by the sharp, metallic scent of industrial fabric and pins. She stood on the raised platform, feet planted firmly apart. The wardrobe team moved around her in a practiced, silent orbit. They worked with quick, precise movements, pulling the silver material taut. Maya did not shift her weight or blink as they secured the edges. She remained a static point in the center of the room. The lead designer reached up, adjusting the drape of the heavy silver cloth. As the fabric folded, it caught the harsh overhead lights, flashing with a brilliant, jagged intensity. Every time the light hit the surface, the material seemed to ripple, mimicking the erratic, dangerous movement of an approaching pressure front. The technicians held their breath, watching the way the silver folds trapped the light and redirected it across the floor. There was no conversation, only the sound of breathing and the occasional metallic click of a needle hitting a frame. She stood perfectly still, a silent anchor as the room filled with the reflected glare of the silver sheets, the atmosphere thickening with the weight of the moment. The lead producer stepped forward, the heavy paper of the script sliding against his palm. He held it out, and Maya took it without a word. She scanned the first page, her eyes tracking the lines with mechanical focus. As she reached the final paragraph, the overhead studio lights flickered, a sudden, erratic pulse that washed the room in harsh, rhythmic shadows. The hum of the ventilation system pitched upward, then cut out entirely. The air in the room grew dense, thick with a sudden, localized drop in pressure. Those standing near the platform felt their ears pop. The script pages in her hand trembled, not from her grip, but from a low-frequency vibration rising from the floorboards. She did not look up, but the static in the air grew sharp, making the fine hairs on the arms of the crew stand on end. Every light in the ceiling buzzed, synchronized by the shift in the room's gravity. The producer retreated a step, watching the way the air seemed to curve around her. She turned the page, and the lamps overhead dimmed to a faint, dying glow, leaving the room in a state of suspended, heavy anticipation. Maya lifted her head, her gaze locking onto her own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She did not blink. The glass seemed to vibrate under the intensity of her focus. Slowly, she raised her right hand, palm facing outward. As her fingers extended, the heavy studio lights overhead surged, glowing with a blinding, unnatural intensity before blowing out in a shower of sparks. The air pressure plummeted again, creating a visible distortion in the room, like heat haze over dry pavement. A camera operator stumbled back, his equipment bag hitting the floor with a dull thud. He scrambled to keep his lens trained on her, his face pale as he adjusted the focus. The production team moved in a frantic blur, trying to capture the flickering currents of energy that were now visible in the air around her. Cables snaked across the floor, twitching as if possessed by their own momentum. A lead technician shouted orders, but the sound was swallowed by the sudden, low-frequency roar building in the room. Maya held her hands steady, her reflection in the cracked mirror now fractured into a dozen sharp, overlapping images. The line between performance and reality had vanished, leaving only the raw, surging power that filled the studio. The sparks died out, leaving the air smelling of ozone and singed plastic. One by one, the emergency backup lights flickered to life, casting long, stark shadows across the production floor. The crew stood motionless, eyes fixed on Maya, who had not moved her hand. The silence was absolute. Slowly, she curled her fingers, and the tension in the room snapped like a taut wire. She began to walk. Each step was precise, the heels of her boots striking the metal flooring with a sharp, echoing rhythm that cut through the lingering stillness. She did not look at the technicians or the producers who were still scrambling to reset their equipment. Her focus remained entirely on the center of the stage. She bypassed a tangled mess of power cables and ignored a fallen light stand. The floor beneath her feet felt solid, grounding the volatile energy that had just surged through the space. She reached the center of the marked area, her shadow stretching long and distorted under the remaining lamps. The director stood behind the monitor, his breath hitched, hand hovering over his headset. He cleared his throat, the sound magnified in the quiet space, and checked the framing one last time. Maya stood perfectly still, waiting for the signal to begin. The director raised his hand and dropped it sharply. Action. The word hung in the air for a fraction of a second before the wind machines roared to life. A wall of artificial air slammed into the center of the stage, catching the loose edges of the set and sending a stack of wooden crates skittering across the floor. Maya did not flinch. She planted her feet, her center of gravity shifting to meet the sudden pressure. As the turbines whined, pushing the velocity higher, she began to move her arms in a slow, sweeping arc. The fabric around her billowed violently, snapping like a sail in a gale. Dust and loose debris were sucked into the vortex, swirling in tight, erratic circles at her feet. She pulled her hands inward, and the sound of the machines deepened to a rhythmic, pulsing thrum that vibrated through the metal grating of the floor. Every muscle in her frame tensed, channeling the raw momentum of the manufactured storm. She arched her back, lifting her chin, and the wind pressure spiked, pinning the cameras against their mounts. The studio lights overhead swayed in the turbulence, casting flickering, frantic shadows across her face. She was no longer just acting. She was the eye of the storm, holding the chaos in place with a single, unwavering gesture. The power cut, and the roar of the turbines died instantly. A heavy, ringing silence flooded the stage, replacing the mechanical fury. Maya did not break her stance. She held the air, her chest rising and falling in perfect, rhythmic control. Dust motes drifted slowly through the stagnant light, settling on the metal floor. The cameras did not stop. They hummed with a low, electronic pulse, tracking the subtle shift in her expression as the artificial storm faded from her eyes. Around the perimeter, the production crew remained frozen, their hands still hovering over switches and cables. No one dared to speak. No one moved to break the seal of the scene. The director stared at the monitor, his knuckles white against the desk, watching the playback of a performance that had already transcended the script. Every frame held the weight of a franchise reborn. Maya finally lowered her arms, the movement slow and deliberate, yet the tension in the room did not dissipate. It hung in the rafters, thick and expectant. This was the foundation. The silence was not an end, but a promise of the storm to come, captured forever in the digital grain of the final take.